If you hit a brick wall, if you run out of all that money, then everyone is harmed.
Coming up on Frontiers, the cost of waiting to solve Alaska's budget crisis and what that could mean to our state's future.
We are not investing a red cent more than we have to in our home or any business interest until the legislature fixes this.
The legislature is made up of people who have families. You know, ask yourself, would you do this to your family if you were in another person's shoes?
Also ahead, the power of culture and tradition. Why this celebration is a reminder for many in Southeast Alaska that dreams really do come true. Hey, hey, hey. Hey, hey, hey.
Alaska, where there are old triumphs, but also new frontiers. With challenges as great as the state itself, but a belief the best is yet to come. Bringing you the faces, the places, and the spirit of the last frontier. This is Frontiers with Rhonda McBride.
Welcome to our program, in which we look at some of the big decisions ahead for lawmakers when they return to Juneau this week. Will they look for a permanent fix to the state's fiscal crisis or decide they've done enough work on the budget? Either way, they must weigh the price of procrastination.
Good hit, Nate.
As the legislature goes into extra innings, few Alaskans have their eye on the ball. They do what Alaskans do. Enjoy the summer. But that game of inside baseball in Juneau has veteran political observers worried that Alaskans, now and into the future, could be big losers.
This is the FY16 budget.
Cliff Grow, with help from his wife Teresa, set up a model for us.
1, 2, 3, 4,
to help
5,
Alaskans
6, 7,
grasp
8, 9, 10.
just what the numbers mean.
There's $2 billion.
Grow says most Alaskans have no idea what's ahead.
When oil prices have gone to hell and oil production has gone to hell, you're in a bad way.
This is a shock absorber.
A double whammy that bankers like Joe Beadle have warned us about for years. A combination of a drop in oil prices and in oil production.
Some of that revenue that we will probably never replace, oil volume is probably not going to come back.
And it'll never come back.
Today, oil prices are less than half of what they were 2 years ago. Recently, they've ranged around $40, now up to about $50. But only enough to fund 1/5 of the budget.
The big items in the budget are K through 12 education. That is $1.3 billion of the budget. Health and social services takes up $1.2 billion.
Oil tax credits are another big draw on the budget. Bottom line, the state has a $4 billion budget gap.
In history, we made money from oil.
A golden goose that has allowed the state to sock billions away.
Each block is $100 million.
There are two major savings accounts.
The white blocks represent the Constitutional Budget Reserve.
And the gold blocks? Earnings from the permanent fund, which could help pay for government. But the downside, your dividend checks will shrink.
This year, all taxes and royalties and oil income is only about $1 billion, less than $1 billion.
With a budget of roughly $5 billion.
The current concept by the legislature is to take more than half of our constitutional budget reserve that's built up over years and balance the budget. This is very disconcerting that the state is balancing its budget with half, more than half of our savings. Very scary.
Next year, there won't be enough in the reserve account to cover the budget. That means permanent fund earnings could be next. And after that, perhaps the entire $50 billion permanent fund, the seed corn for our dividend checks.
I believe that our permanent fund dividend will go away if we don't do anything, because we're going to need all of the money from the permanent fund to sustain basic government.
After that, then what?
Doing nothing is not an option. And the longer you wait, the lousier your options become.
The fear, without new taxes or some permanent fund earnings, investor confidence in our state will slide. which could send the rest of the economy into a tailspin.
It seems to me that the legislature doesn't maybe want to face the political reality. Oh, here's Eli. Go, Eli!
A reality some Alaskans take seriously.
We are not investing a red cent more than we have to in our home or any business interest until the legislature fixes this.
Others haven't thought that far ahead. After all, we've glided along for so many years with no income taxes and sizable dividend checks. There are some, like William Bynum, who fear the burden will fall heavier on some. He hopes the legislature takes this to heart.
I would hope that I would treat everybody as well as I want to be treated.
His hope lawmakers will follow the golden rule, pull together, and move forward.
The legislature is made up of people who have families. You know, ask yourself, would you do this to your family if you were in another person's shoes?
For now, the waters are calm, the Alaskan dream reflected in the beauty here, which makes it so hard to imagine the changes ahead. Thus far, it's been a contentious special session, with the governor at odds with both Democrats and Republicans.
Do we have to go broke before we fix Alaska? I guess that's my question to the legislature.
The most recent development came on Monday when a bill to restructure the permanent fund dividend program passed the Senate. For some, it was an emotional vote.
I have children and grandchildren, and they're struggling day to day, week to week, in making their family house payments or food, going to the grocery store. So I understand the difficulty, but the problem with the math is it just doesn't get better. It only gets worse.
The bill still hasn't cleared the House, and when lawmakers recessed, it was short of a few votes for passage. Democrats objected because they feel the measure benefits the rich and hurts the poor.
I think the public is with us to know that tough choices need to be made this year, and it would be irresponsible to kick the can down the road yet again. So this is the moment for tough decisions to be made, and the permanent fund cannot be the only solution.
Democrats want to spread the burden with a range of taxes. Now, there are also some Republicans against the measure. They say their constituents want more cuts instead of reduced dividends. So what might shake loose the political gridlock in Juneau? KTVA's Liz Raines has had a front row seat on the political action in the legislature going back to day one. She joins us now from our sister station, KTVA in Juneau, for some analysis. Liz, I have to ask you, did you think that you would be in Juneau this long?
I didn't, Rhonda. You know, when the session first started back in January, lawmakers on both sides kept insisting that they could finish this in 90 days, and here we are 2 months into overtime. Now, session did eventually wrapped up with legislators on June 11th last year, and we're already past that mark, with most of the governor's plan still on the table.
Now, the governor, when he started the special session, gave the legislature a to-do list. How far has he gotten with that?
Well, we're about halfway through that to-do list. So far, lawmakers have passed all three of the budgets: the state's operating budget, the mental health budget, the capital budget. They've also passed a bill on adoptions, foster care, insurance, and most importantly, they've gotten through a big sticking point, which was oil and gas tax credits. They did come to a compromise on that. We still don't know yet whether or not the governor will veto that bill.
Well, the rest of the list has the big ticket items, the tough stuff. So where is the governor on that?
That's right, Rhonda. We still have the governor's permanent fund plan on the table. As you mentioned, that has passed the Senate, but it still has to get past the House. We've got a slew of taxes as well: an income tax, fishing, mining, motor fuel tax, as well as a bill that the governor has to create an oil and gas fund. And we also still have the governor's bill on the survivor benefits for peace officers who are killed in the line of duty.
So what happens when the legislature resumes on Monday?
Well, as you mentioned, the Senate did pass the governor's permanent fund plan, so we're going to be seeing that work through the House. They're going to be taking it up in the House Finance Committee, and it does have to move out of that committee before it can go to a vote of the full body, either up or down. So we'll be watching to see if that bill has the support to move out. Right now, we're told that it most likely doesn't.
Well, Liz, we will look for your coverage, and we'll also hear more from you later in our program. You covered the celebration festivities in Juneau. Well, up next, we haven't heard much from Dan Fauske since he resigned as head of the Alaska Gasline Development Corporation, but he's here now along with Larry Pursley, another veteran political observer. We'll get their take on the cost of waiting for a permanent budget fix.
Hi, I'm Randy Richards here at Wasilla Dodge. 41 years in Alaska with 12 years living in Bush, Alaska, I understand the challenges of shopping over the phone and computer. That's why Wasilla Dodge is making shopping for a new or pre-owned vehicle easier than ever. Wasilla Dodge has hundreds of vehicles online at wasilladodge.com. You can view our inventory, fill out an easy online credit app, and call me, Randy Richards, and I'll even help coordinate the shipping. Save big right now on a new vehicle at wasilladodge.com.
Hi, I'm Anchorage Mayor Ethan Berkowitz. All this hot, dry weather makes this an unusually dangerous wildfire season. So please, be extra careful this summer in our parks, on our trails, and along our greenbelts. If you see unattended or illegal campfires, fireworks, or other dangerous fire activity, call 911 immediately. Together we can prevent a major wildfire and keep this beautiful Alaska summer safe. Thanks.
This message brought to you by Mayor Ethan Berkowitz and your Anchorage Fire Department.
Fire roared to life yesterday around 1 p.m. It took a lot of people by surprise. That's where I like to be. I like to be where things are happening, where people are. That's just how I am. I just don't want to sit around behind a desk. I mean, I think it's important to actually be out there telling the stories from where the stories are happening. We're about exceptional journalism, and I think we've really proved that. I think we're working hard every single day to achieve that, and that's what you're going to get.
We always like to say politics is Alaska's favorite sport, but some Alaskans are worried about some of the gamesmanship going on in Juneau, and joining us to talk about that, two longtime political veterans who have served several governors, Larry Pursley and Dan Fauske, who most recently served as head of the Alaska Gasline Development Corporation. So both of you have observed different governors and this governor. You know, what are some of his challenges this time around? You know, is there something he could be doing that might get the result he needs?
Well, it was the game of musical chairs. You had a lot of governors who were afraid they were going to be there when we ran out of money. Governor Walker drew the short straw, as you would say. So while he's governor, we've got to deal with this for all the reasons that people have been saying. What more can he do? He probably needs to learn how to work a little better with the legislature. It's not be so adversarial, not put them in a position where maybe they want to do something, but they don't want him to get the victory. But they've got to come to an answer.
That's inside politics. But is inside politics, Dan, something that's important that you need to pay attention to?
Oh, absolutely. You know, the relationship between the executive and the legislative branch is always somewhat contentious. And in this particular case, the election itself was contentious. And I think that then sends a clear signal that you need to work closely with the legislature and the executive to get those things. And communication is always key. I think it's always in the governors I've been around and doing this for decades, I guess I can say now, is none of them take kindly to being mandated to or directed to do things. There has to be this kind of natural ebb and flow of sharing of data. Sometimes you'll absolutely not ever agree on stuff, but other times you need to be able to seek out and take those opportunities that arise to get a problem solved. And in this particular case, I think there's some naivete, and I think there's some learning adjustments going along as you try to figure out how do you deal with the co-chairs of Senate Finance and the House co-chairs. And
I guess because the legislature the leadership was saying, you know, Governor, you need to be counting the votes, and you need to be getting those votes that you don't have so that we can get over the hump here.
Yeah, they sort of laid it on him to count votes. I guess I would say, look, they want to solve this problem too. It's not acceptable to me to say, well, it's just the governor's problem. It's all 61 of them have to work on this, as Dan said. They all need to be not so much counting votes, but figuring out what is going to get enough votes to pass that will help solve our fiscal problem.
Well, the governor has talked a lot about the price of procrastination, the cost of waiting. From a financial perspective, what are some of the costs of waiting for the state if we don't get a long-term fiscal fix?
Well, I think the problem can worsen, and if you're not careful, you know, you wait too long, and as has been pointed out by numerous folks, that you only have so much money in these reserves, and that from a long-term perspective, you need to have a plan in play for investors and for the rating agencies that shows, because state governments and government in general, they're long-term discussions, long-term debts being issued.
What about our risk to our credit? I mean, is that a serious one by not getting a clear signal to the business community that we're going to find a way to pay for government?
Absolutely. It's a very real risk, and ever since the last crash, of 7 or 8 years ago, where the rating agencies were faulted to a great deal by not paying more attention to what was going on in the banking industry and the mortgage industry, they've increased their oversight and it's a world of negativity, and
it's not just, as Dan pointed out, the credit rating. It's the uncertainty, the fact that you look like you're not financially responsible. You're not going to have private investment in the state. Forget the state borrowing money. Private companies are going to say it's not a good place to invest, and people will say, look, I can leave Alaska. I can get a job somewhere else. You're going to lose the population that you don't want to lose, the ones who have money and can move somewhere else. Not doing anything is really bad long-term on a lot of fronts.
And you know, you've seen it through your work when you headed up the Alaska Housing Finance Corporation, just the importance of being able to borrow money.
Absolutely. I remember in 95, 96, Alaska Housing Finance Corporation was the main game in town, and the dividend that we were paying to the state. And it caused a great deal of concern with the rating agencies because of the amount of money that was being anticipated, and the amount of money that was demanded, if you will, by the legislature. And it took some doing to try and convince legislators that don't kill the goose that laid the golden egg. And they listened. And then we went back and negotiated a deal where the drawdown on HFC's assets to help fund state government would be measured and based on a formula.
Rather than doing it all at once, which is
Correct.
kind of what the legislature wants to do.
Yeah.
They do, but it's also, I guess, it's hard for the legislature for years, for decades, for 2 generations. Alaskans have gotten a dividend, not paid taxes, and been told, don't worry, price of oil will go back up, we'll figure that we won't have a problem. So now, here it is in 2016, this really is a fundamental, serious, it's not going to change unless we do something problem. And the governor, to his credit, has been pretty open about that. He doesn't have to run again until 2018. He's got very high approval ratings, legislature very low approval ratings. A lot of them have to run again this year. The politics makes it difficult to come up with an answer that many Alaskans don't want to hear.
So do we have some legislators putting the interest of Alaskans, setting it aside for political power that they hope to gain in the next election?
I don't think that's the case. I think you have legislators that represent certain constituencies that they're under a great deal of pressure to listen to the people that put them in office in reference to bloated government, the statement we hear all the time, the size of government, taxes, don't you dare tax me until I have assurance that I believe that government has been shrunk to the point that it makes sense. And it's a hard constituency or hard issue with your constituents when they have this belief system that you're not going to tax me until
you've cut to the bone.
You've cut to the bone. And I think we need to determine as a state, what should government and at what level should it be at? Because you constantly hear this. And I think this year's presentation of the budget didn't do much to help resolve that problem. And again, but the budget that was presented by the governor was pretty high, minimal cuts to it, and 11 tax proposals on top of it. And you throw that into the mix, and you're really looking for a fight because you haven't given legislators an opportunity. I mean, the problem's been dumped on them. I think tax proposals are worthy and need to be discussed, but they need to be well thought out and when done, that they've been done properly and that people understand exactly. I don't think people mind paying a tax as long as they don't think they're paying a tax to fortify or subsidize government that they already believes inflated or bloated. Does that make sense? I mean, it's...
So Larry, what has to happen if say we don't get that permanent fund earnings capacity to be able to tap into that to pay for government?
Well, if there is no legislation this year to draw on permanent fund earnings to help balance the budget, you're going to have to take it all from the constitutional budget reserve, which is very short-sighted, very dangerous, drains almost half the account. I think in the end, some form of permanent fund earnings legislation will pass. You talk about our legislators putting their own interest ahead of the state. I don't think so. As Dan said, they're trying to balance their constituents, who may be at one end of the spectrum, with the interest of the state. I think in the end, there'll be some compromises. The House will insist on some provisions the Senate doesn't like. In the end, they will pass something that starts using permanent fund earnings to help pay for public services for the first time, which needs to happen, and I think will happen this year.
Well, Dan, we're just about out of time, but quickly, you were head of the Gas Line Corporation. How important is the capacity, the capability of borrowing money for us getting a natural gas project?
It's huge. It would make or break that project. You have to have access to good low-cost capital in large amounts, depending on how this is structured and financed. So it is a serious issue. And one other thing to remember about rating agencies and credit, as the state's credit goes, so go the municipal governments within the state. The Kenai Borough and the North Slope Borough and others. If the state's credit gets downgraded, regardless of how strong they are, there is a natural tendency to draw down and put extreme pressure on the ratings of these other governments.
Alrighty, and we are in a Web Extra going to talk more about the gas project, which is the prize that we should be having our eye on, many people think. So I want to thank both of you for joining us, Larry Pursley and Dan Fauske. Well, still ahead, a celebration. Moments from one of the largest gatherings of Alaska Native people.
I just want cremation.
No hidden costs, no add-ons.
Cremation is much more affordable.
Dignified, ecological.
I just want something basic. The simpler, the better.
Cremation sure makes a lot of sense. The Cremation Society of Alaska is now serving families in Anchorage and in the Valley, and we are always on the web at alaskacremation.com. Call us today at 277-2777 or in the Valley 373-8627.
The Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium provides comprehensive health services for Alaska Native and American Indian people across our state. In addition to world-class care at the Alaska Native Medical Center, our work delivers health services for rural Alaska. From cutting-edge technology for the best care possible, to modern construction of clean water systems and health clinics, to health training and outreach that honors our culture, our vision is that Alaska Native people are the healthiest people in the world.
One caring foster parent
can make the difference
between a good life
and a not so good life
for a child.
What does it take?
The willingness to be there.
The willingness to care.
The willingness
to open your heart
and your home
for one child.
One child.
one child.
Me.
Will you be the difference for one child? Call today, 1-800-478-7307.
Good morning, I'm Megan Mazurek.
And I'm James Gaddis. Well, I came to Alaska to fulfill my dream of finally working on a morning show. It's the one thing I want to do. When I got here, it was just a man and his dog. Now I've got a few more priorities, a few more responsibilities. Life has changed for the best in ways that I never imagined. I knew this would be, one of those trips, one of those life-changing ventures coming up here, but I didn't think it would be anything as fulfilling as this.
Although it's one of the largest gatherings of Alaska Natives, it's known simply as Celebration. The See Alaska Heritage Institute brings clans from across Southeast Alaska to Juneau. And as Liz Raines shows us, Celebration is a time to reconnect to the past and a time of hope and renewal.
It happens once every other year. Juneau welcomes thousands from across Southeast to its shores. Most come by flight or ferry, but for a few, it's a weeks-long journey on the waves.
We do it to bring the culture back, an old way of traveling. When we're out on the water, it's very prayerful.
Their paddles dip into the same water that kept their ancestors afloat. Now, centuries later, their spirit is resurfacing.
It's that sense of belonging. The spirit inside of you says, this is part of me now, and it has been. I just didn't know it until now.
Together, their movement breathes life into a collective memory, a heartbeat, a pulse. Dancers wrap themselves in stories immortalized by heirloom.
What I'm wearing is a killer whale in honor of my father's family, the Fin House, the Eagle Fin House in Klukwan. So, yep.
Artists lace moments together to outlast time.
You're putting your intentions, you're putting your good thinking into it, and you're knowing that these works will go into the hands of people who will use them to be held up in ceremony to catch the tears of their opposite clan members. I mean, there's power in here.
For 4 days, a collage of clans reunite for a celebration of culture that has survived. For Frontiers, Liz Raines, KTVA 11 News.
Well, perhaps some of the optimism and enthusiasm from Celebration will linger on when the politicians return to Juneau. It's time to leave you now with one last look at Celebration. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.